Another edition of Good Karma Wrestling. I'm Gabe Neitzel from ESPN Milwaukee, from ESPN West Palm. Brian Rowitz. No Jonathan Hood this week. He's on assignment. But if you really miss Jay Hood's wrestling takes, make sure you listen to Sirius XM's Busted Open Radio coming up on Sunday. That gets going at 9 a.m. Eastern, goes till noon. Again, Sirius XM Busted Open Radio on Sunday with Jonathan Hood. Where we begin, as we are on the road to WrestleMania and continue to try to make sense of some of the mess that's been going on. They're trying to do a good job of piecing it all together. But there's still a lot of mystery over, okay, we know what one of the main events is.
Yes.
We already know we have Cody, we've got Roman. That was decided last Thursday. We did the emergency pod just hours after you guys were done recording last week, which again somehow feels like it was already a month ago.
Right.
But I mean, maybe what is going to end up being the other main events? What is closing out? I guess if you really fantasy book this, maybe Cody Roman ends night one. Who knows what ends up on night two? But what is the second WrestleMania main event in your mind, Brian? Because I think there are a number of different ways you can go.
Well, let's start with what you sort of said there. Night two is the real main event, right? Like that's where we're getting Roman Cody. That's where The Rock's going to somehow be involved. That's night two, right?
Maybe. Yes.
That's the main event. That's how you end the show.
You can convince me that that's night one, and then you get The Rock actually in the ring on night two.
Okay, I guess that's the one exception to the rule. And then if they don't announce it, all right, I'll let you have that one. In terms of the second Mania main event, I think we've always assumed, and obviously plans have changed a lot the last few weeks, that it was going to be Punk and Rollins for the other world title, as we call it. We still don't know if Rollins is healthy. We're going under the assumption that Rollins is healthy and can work a Mania main event. But that's an assumption at this point. That's all we know at this point, right? Like, that's it.
Yes. We cannot with 100% certainty book on that. Seriously, I'm sitting here crossing my fingers in hopes that please stay healthy, because I'll tell you what, Seth Rollins cut one of the best promos of his career on Monday night. It was a spectacular promo that he gave with Cody Rhodes standing beside him in the ring. So I'm hoping he can go. Again, I just can't say with 100, I'm assuming he's going to be able to be good enough to go. And in a world where not that long ago, Cody Rhodes was able to smoke his mirror way through a match with Seth Rollins with a torn pectoral muscle, my guess is they could at least smoke and mirrors a match enough if Seth isn't 100%.
So in terms of that title picture, Elimination Chamber starting to come together. We already know Drew McIntyre, Randy Orton, Bobby Lashley, LA Knight for the 6 participants. The other 2 will be decided this week, Miz or Logan Paul and KO versus Dom Dom. None of those names excite me to main event a WrestleMania. Drew McIntyre has been on an amazing run. He's been on one hell of a run. We've talked about it might be the best story going on Raw right now. But we've seen that interaction with Seth. We've seen those matches. We've seen Drew come up short. I would expect him to do the same. To me, the other Mania main event I want to see is Rhea and Becky. Rhea Ripley deserves some sort of reward for the work she has put in carrying Monday Night Raw, being the face of Monday Night Raw, and doing everything she's done. And that's no knock on Rollins, because he's been that workman also. But those two, Becky and Rhea, getting a chance to close a WrestleMania, that's well-deserved for both of them.
Yeah, so in terms of what they've kind of been lining up, and Becky gave a great promo.
Yeah.
Again, not shocking. She gave a great promo, again, on Monday Night Raw. So in terms of the ones that seem to be in the hopper, I would say, yes, that should be the other main events. Especially because Becky has that. And honestly, I think Becky would be putting Rhea over in that situation.
Sure.
And I think that would be fantastic for Becky to go into another main event of WrestleMania, put Rhea over, continue to establish her as one of the top stars. And then you really get a build going, I think, for next year, where you could go Rhea versus Bianca Belair, who are kind of that next generation of this women's division. But honestly, the thing that I think excites me the most at this point is, as I mentioned, you do Roman versus Cody night number 1.
Okay.
And night number 2 is Rock versus Cody. Because at this point, the thing that was most exciting And the guy who continues to step up and I'm not going to miss SmackDown tomorrow night. I can't wait for it because I want to see what the dynamic is between Roman and Rock. Because as they've pivoted, which I'm a mark, I can raise my hand. I was a mark. I believe I said on this show in our emergency podcast that I did not think this was a pivot. There is more than ample of evidence that this is indeed a pivot. I think there was even an interview that The Rock did prior to all of this. That just came up today where he said that the reason he was coming back to WrestleMania is Rock versus Roman and the biggest match that you could do at WrestleMania. And yeah, look. So, and maybe you end up getting there anyway. But I think after the press conference and going back and watching the press conference again, and the way that The Rock is the one who stepped up to Hunter and said, fix it. Mm-hmm. I think we already know who the head of the table is. And it ain't Roman. Yeah. It's Dwayne. It's The Rock. And after he slapped Cody Rhodes, after he was the one to step up and defend their family's honor, like I want to see Cody versus Rock more than I want to see Cody versus Roman at this point. So I think you could do something where Cody goes over, ends up winning the championship from Roman in night 1, and then he just goes on and beats Rock in night 2. Because that's the match I really want to see, where Rock, just completely demolishes Roman Reigns, talks down to him in the ring. You can then set up that match for later down the line because I think Rock is going to at least be peripherally around with his job with the TKO board. But Rock versus Cody seems to be where this money actually is. That's what I really want to see. He's the one out there calling the Cody fans Cody crybabies. Like he's the one out there like really pushing WrestleMania, and we're getting Rock heel. He had another long Instagram post where he goes after the Cody crybabies, and there's going to be Cody crybaby merch from all the reports out there. So it seems to me that in the matter of 1 week, we've gone from, well, I guess in the span of 2 weeks, we've kind of gone from the biggest match that WWE could do at WrestleMania was Rock versus Roman. Then we went to, okay, well, after the way the crowd reacted, I guess the biggest thing we can do is Cody versus Roman. But in reality, the biggest match they can do now is Cody versus Rock because The Rock is the one out there selling everything for the bloodline.
Yeah, I completely agree with all that. I mean, the Rumble feels like it's 3 years ago at this point. Cody winning his second Rumble, Punk getting hurt. That was somehow less than a month ago. So much has happened. And I feel like we can do this show every week up until
like 3 weeks ago. It was like 2.5 weeks ago.
I know. That's insane.
It's only February 15th.
Right. That makes no sense. And we're going to be waking up at 4 a.m. Eastern for an Elimination Chamber next week because that's where we are on this road to WrestleMania. I agree. Like Cody versus Rock is far more interesting than Roman versus Cody at this point. And you saw the dynamic of that presser where Roman sort of in that Uso solo role where he is behind The Rock. He is that step back. He's not even with them. Even the side-by-side from a size standpoint, now The Rock looks so much bigger than Roman. Like, there is something to that, and that's completely changed the dynamic and cut the legs out from Roman in the last week or so.
Well, yeah. So I heard Bully Ray kind of talking about this on Busted Open, where, the way they're trained and where the hard camera is and Dwayne being Dwayne, The Rock knows where that hard camera is. Right. So at the press conference, when he steps up and he's in front of Roman, like he naturally, I think he's just bigger because he's a brick bleep house at this point. Yeah. Like he's just so massive. But like him stepping in front of the hard camera and making himself look even bigger than Roman in that moment, it's very obvious to me, and I think it's very obvious to anybody else that that's the real leader of the bloodline now. Yeah. Like it didn't take that long. All they had to do was show up, and now he's the one in charge, not Paul Heyman, not Roman Reigns. It's The Rock. And if this is Cody versus bloodline, and this is Cody finishing his story, well, part of that story now is getting the taste slapped out of your mouth by The Rock at a press conference. Like that's a part of the story. So finishing the story to me is not just beating Roman. Because Roman's no longer the lead boss. If this is a video, if we're going to talk about this like a video game, The Rock is now like the final boss in order for you to finish the story. And if the WWE's goal is to put Cody over as much as possible, which is where they've kind of pivoted to, there's no bigger way than to be the first double main eventer in WWE history.
Yeah, that adds to the Cody story. The crazy part to me as we talk through this all is we have talked for what feels like 27 years about how when Roman eventually loses those titles, and is pinned to the mat in a singles match, it's going to be a big deal. It doesn't feel as big anymore. Like, yes, there'll be the historical significance of, hey, he hasn't been pinned since God knows when at this point. But it's just going to be like, all right, well, what about The Rock? What about this? What about, Rollins' involvement? Like, there's so many other things that have trumped the meaningfulness of that.
Yeah, but I will say that, again, going back to Seth and the promo that he cut, like, he provided, he added the sense of urgency to it, the way he was able to deliver that promo of, hey, this may be our last chance. This may be our best chance to unseat Roman Reigns as this longest reigning guy of the modern era, right? Like, so I thought that Seth and they could probably still continue to add, levels of that over the next month and a half. But still, and again, it depends upon how The Rock interacts with Roman and how that all goes. And look, they could pivot that in the blink of an eye, just like the way they pivoted from Rock Roman to Cody versus Roman, and they can figure out a way to pivot that. Maybe that's possible. But as it stands right now on February 15th, the biggest match they can now do is Cody versus Rock. And again, the Rock was on the Pat McAfee show a week ago today talking about training. So if he's training, he's putting in all that work to get back in the ring. I can't imagine that he's just going to be there to give a rock bottom as part of the schmozzy finish that is every Bloodline match at this point. He's going to go in there and rock bottom Cody Rhodes, but then eat a blackout or whatever they call it, the stomp from Seth Rollins, right? Like, if he's training, he's actually going to get in the ring. And again, I don't think we can trust, because we know Seth Rollins is defending in one match with the Elimination Chamber. So I don't want to trust. And heck, I don't want to ask Seth Rollins to pull double duty and do a tag match with him versus Cody versus Rock and Roman. So I just keep coming back to this idea of having Cody be this double main eventer and completely build it around Bloodline versus Cody.
I think the other funny part is we've done over 100 episodes of this show. One of our biggest WWE knocks has been, as good as the Bloodline story is, the other things are lacking. They haven't built up other stars. They haven't told other stories. And we've complimented Triple H's booking the last few months about some of the stars he's built up, the Drew stuff, the Rhea stuff. But as we talk through this, it's Bloodline here and everyone else below that, to the point where you're saying it should be Bloodline in both nights main event in WrestleMania. Like, there's no other story out there. They're like, yeah, they deserve one night of WrestleMania that is now 2 nights. Maybe if we go to 3 nights next year, it could be a non-Bloodline main event.
Well, and as bad, because I've criticized the Bloodline since last WrestleMania. Agreed. Like, the Bloodline, and that's why, to me, Cody versus Roman is just a little boring at this point, because they didn't build anything off of the Bloodline this year to make Cody versus Roman 2 that more meaningful. Right. You could have done Bloodline Civil War. Like, Bloodline Civil War is pretty much the only significant thing that they've done. Yeah. And you could have done Bloodline Civil War without the championships. Right. Like, you could have built that of Roman blaming the Uso, and you kind of do that whole thing, and you continue that Bloodline. But honestly, the Bloodline's now more interesting because you added The Rock. Right. Just like the Bloodline was able to really kind of control 2022 into 2023 because of Sami Zayn. Right. Like, with Roman not around, there's only so much that, as we've seen, Paul Heyman can do. So now with The Rock involved, the Bloodline becomes interesting again, because The Rock is one of the most interesting characters in WWE history. And because he's a part of that Bloodline, and now they've had to pivot, so now we have to see what they're going to do with him. So with The Rock involved, the Bloodline, because again, it's just like when Cena comes back, or any of these guys have come back in the past, the Rock is one of the biggest stars in WWE history. Yeah, no, he's main eventing one of those nights.
That's the thing. I agree with that. I think that's all fair. But I think just looking at the other stuff, like, the other wild card out there, I don't know if it's main event, but they put a lot of time into it, is Gunther and that IC title run and the monster they've built him into. Like, I'm sure we'll get a schmozzy finish, but the fact they're doing him and Jay on Monday, I thought that could be a Mania main event, essentially.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, if they do another schmozzy finish there and try to, like, continue to push that off to Mania, because I thought that was the direction they were going for Mania, of main event Jey Uso versus Gunther. Who knows what they end up going there? But yeah, I mean, they do a lot around Gunther. I mean, Logan Paul. They have built up, especially, I would say, in the women's division. Like, Bayley versus Io. Like, Bailey versus Io probably 2 or 3 years ago, probably pre-bloodline. You've got a chance of that potentially being a main event because, I mean, Damage Control has been such a big part of WWE and their storytelling. So this breakup, which they've teased numerous times, but pulled the trigger on it finally, like, I think that's going to be interesting and compelling how Bailey is able to navigate. Is Dakota Kai actually on her side? Is Dakota Kai going to be that equalizer of, Asuka and Kairi Sane, who are in the corner of Io Sky? Like, there's interesting things you can do there. I think that needs to, while it's not going to be main eventing one of the nights, it needs to be given its proper time. And I always worry about that because as good as Hunter has been, and he's even mentioned this a couple times in press conferences about trying to keep these cards tight, right? In terms of the number of matches. He doesn't want to overbook it because he wants to give everything its proper time. WrestleMania is different.
Right.
Like, WrestleMania is it's just always just packed together. So I worry about something like that getting the time that it deserves because it has been a good story.
No, that feels like something that easily gets lost in the shuffle of those two nights where, we've heard wrestlers say, obviously the main event is the spot they want, but the opening match is maybe the second most important part. So if it's Bloodline ending nights 1 and 2, the opening matches, I feel like, have to be Rollins and have to be Rhea. So, like, Bailey and them just get lost in that situation.
I don't know. I mean, they always put, whenever they were doing these triple main events, WrestleManias, again, roll your eyes, but like Punk versus Taker was always towards the back.
Sure.
Like, so to me, I really, because it's been a while since we've seen that NXT Bailey. And I'm not talking about, side pony. I'm talking about like the one who put, what's that?
We got to get that at Mania for that pop. Side ponytail, the wavy arm guys.
100%. I'm a hugger, all that. But that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the Bailey that put on the show that she did with Sasha Banks. Like the Bailey that we know is in there that can absolutely go in that ring. And I think that if you put Io and Bailey to kick off one of the nights, you're not going to be disappointed.
Yeah, I agree.
Those two are going to put on a spectacular show.
I agree. And that's it. Like, I think we're in a fun spot right now. Elimination Chamber, we're a little over a week away. The women's chamber right now, Becky, Bianca, Liv, still 3 more spots there. We assume that's going to be Becky. There's a lot to build off of. And as much as we talk about how WrestleMania is not for the hardcore wrestling fan, there should be a lot of those moments where you're like, all right, this is fun. Let me kick my feet up. This has 5-star potential.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, again, they've pivoted. They've got a long way to go to get there, but there's a lot of potential certainly for WrestleMania 40. We like to talk about 3 other top stories going around in the world of professional wrestling. We call it our 3 count. What's number 1 this week, Brian?
We saw more seeds being planted last night for AEW Revolution, where Sting and Darby Allin will defend the tag titles against Matthew and Nicholas Jackson, the Young Bucks. Does Sting lose his final match?
I think he does.
It feels like that, right?
It kind of feels like he does. And look, that's not a Tony Khan thing, because this is clearly like Tony has given to me 2 wrestlers just complete autonomy over whatever they're doing. And those 2 wrestlers are Sting and Bryan Danielson. Like, those 2 can pretty much do whatever they want, especially with Bryan Danielson talking about this being his final year of full-time professional wrestling. Like, I think he's just kind of letting him, go out there and do whatever you want. And then, magically somebody shows up to wrestle, Danielson on Collision. You're like, all right, well, I guess I got to watch this now. Oh, shucks. Got to watch it. Got to watch a tremendous wrestling match.
You, Brian? Like, where do they work? Like, do you have their contact info? How does this work? That's what we're at this point.
Like, at this point, I wouldn't be shocked if, like, he wants to wrestle someone in WWE and they work it out. Like, that because that's what's going on with Danielson. But this is obviously Sting on his way out. Mm-hmm. And Sting's an old school guy. And I think in the same way with Taker, like, Taker winning his last match wasn't really Taker winning his last match because it was one of those cinematic matches. Like, it wasn't like the old school Taker type of match. But this is an old school match. It's a tag team match, and they're the champions. I don't see them just vacating the titles because Sting is retiring. Like, what would give? They're building up Nicholas and Matthew Jackson as these monster heels. And what would give those 2 more heat than pinning Sting's shoulders to the mats, probably by some nefarious way, and winning the tag team championships. Like, it gets those two mega heat. Like, we're talking, I think, if they do this right with Nicholas and Matt Jackson, which this is probably my favorite version of the Young Bucks since AEW has started. We're talking like 6 months ago, Dominic Mysterio level heat that you could get for these two if you do this right over the next couple of weeks.
Well, along those lines, is that how Revolution ends? Is it the Bucks standing over Sting with the belts, with the suits that still have the blood on it, and WCW in the 90s and just trash in the ring? Is that how Revolution ends?
I mean, it can't, can it? Like, they actually then, if Sting is losing, they actually then have to main event with the triple threat match, right? Like, if Sting was winning, then Sting can main event. But if Sting is losing, like, I don't think we can do that. But again, Sting's an old school guy. And the way you always do it, whether it's you're leaving the territory, whether it's you're retiring, the old adage in professional wrestling is you go out on your back.
Right. And I mean, that would add so much to the Bucks. Like, this character is amazing. Like, wrestling in the suits and the hat last night, like, they're doing everything that's just perfect.
Wrestling in the suits was just, it was so good.
And actually changing the entrance music, like not doing the whole, Jericho still playing Judas, even though he's a heel, like changing all that stuff. Like, yes, it would add a ton. I just wonder if they have the balls to end the show like that, because they keep billing Revolution like Revolution Sting's final match, Revolution Sting's final match, when they're talking about everything on that card, that it almost feels like that is the main event.
It does. I mean, and you've built it so much. Like, you're going to Greensboro because of the historic significance of Sting, right? It almost feels like if you would have done Ric Flair's last match and Ric Flair's opening, right? Like, Ric Flair's last match wasn't actually the main event of the card. It kind of feels like it has to be the main event. But also, I don't know how you close out a pay-per-view in 2024 with Sting lying on the mat looking up at the lights as Nicholas and Matt in their bloody suits are holding the AEW Tag Team Championship.
I mean, you do it and then Sting just sells for like 20, 30 minutes. We go off air and then he says goodbye to the fans. Like, you do it that way, maybe?
Well, yeah, I mean, yes, the goodbye to the fans has to be done like after you've signed off. Like, we can't have a Clash in the Castle situation. Like, can't have that here. But again, it just feels, everything the way they've been building it feels like Sting's going out on his back. Which, by the way, I'm completely okay with and 100% respect, because again, like it continues. The business goes on without you, and Sting realizes that, and that's why that's the adage. You go out on your back because you want to give that rub to someone. And when this thing started, I'm like, oh, they're going against Nick and Matt Jackson. But then when they became Nicholas and Matt, and they continued to, find Tony Schiavone $1,000, and they find the one, production guy $500 a couple of weeks ago, and they continued to kind of lean into that. Like, this has been my favorite iteration, and it would give them a really good rub, which I did not think I'd be saying, a month ago. But here we are, and storyline-wise, it makes sense. Passing the torch line, it makes sense. You can then have a, ticked off Darby Allin begin a chase for those two, maybe with a different tag team partner, maybe just being a vigilante and trying to be a thorn in their side by himself. Like, you can do a lot of different things, I think, off of that. But if you're a fan of Sting, I think you need to grow accustomed to the fact that in a couple of weeks here, he's going to be losing.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Like, I think we all sort of always thought the end of Sting would be him versus Darby getting the pin, getting that moment of going over his mentor. And then we saw him go this route, and we've seen the reports that he basically handpicked the Bucks. And the Bucks, as heels, as champions, going out like that makes the whole division stronger. Because now you have so many face tag teams. You have the Top Flight. You have FTR. Like, so many teams that can then chase the Bucks and hopefully elevate that tag team division to what it once was in AEW.
By the way, thank God we're not doing Sting versus Darby.
Really?
Like, thank God. Well, I mean, I imagine Darby doing one of those suicide dives, and I know Sting has taken some calculated risks, and who did he suplex off the stage and nearly miss the damn table?
Yeah. Well, was it last week where he took the dive where it was very close? The week they won the titles, like, he almost missed his wedding. He got a little close recently.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. And like Darby being the speeding bullet that he is, just flying, like I don't need to see Sting actually die in his last match. And as hard as Darby, because Darby only has one speed. Like Darby can't like, oh, I'm going against my mentor Sting. I've got to dial it back. Like that's not possible.
Right.
Like that's absolutely not possible. I would not need, as much as we were worried about when Punk came back and wrestled Darby Allin, going, ooh, first match back, taking that suicide dive. Like, I don't need to see an over 60-year-old Sting taking that suicide dive.
Yeah, his chest probably would not be ready to take Darby straight into it. So it'll be fun. I'm sure they'll do the tornado rules again, so that way you can hide them a little bit. But like, we know that match is going to deliver. This pay-per-view continues to be built out weeks in advance. Something new for AEW, where if you look at the card now, I don't think they need to add a damn thing. They probably will add 10 more matches, but this is a damn good card we're going to have in a few weeks in Greensboro.
Yeah, look, AEW's been putting on, I think, some pretty good television shows recently. Toni Storm just continues her film last night was not shocking. She nailed it, knocked it out of the park. But even Deonna Purrazzo's like response to it, where she's getting emotional, clearly choked up that her friend changed the tattoo that they had together, but keeping it short and sweet. Like her retort to that was spectacular. Like they've been doing it's one of the better builds they've done, especially in recent memory, towards a pay-per-view. That's for sure.
Completely agree.
What do we got at number 2 this week?
All right. Speaking of AEW, their future looking pretty bright. 3 free agents seem to be headed their way to AEW. Rank them in terms of their future AEW impact. Okada, Osprey, and Mercedes Mone.
So this is super easy for me. Number 1, and then there's a gap after number 1, is Mercedes Mone.
Okay.
I think it's Mercedes. And look, I mean, we've already seen some of Osprey so in AEW, and I think that's kind of limiting. I don't think it's going to limit his impact, but the fact that he's not even there yet and you have to announce a match with him not being there, kind of stings. And Okada at 36 at this point, like Okada's still going to be an attraction, but I just don't see him factoring in the way that Mercedes Mone is. Because I think with Mercedes, and what they've added with Deonna Purrazzo and what Toni Storm's been doing. And once Britt Baker, I don't know where the bleep she's been, but once you add Britt Baker back into that with Thunder Rosa coming back, like this could be the best women's division in professional wrestling, which is saying something given the respect level I have of what WWE has right now. But I think that this has the potential with Mercedes Mone to be the best women's division in all of pro wrestling. And I think Mercedes is headlining that. Like, I think we could get, more than just 1 or 2 women's matches, on a pay-per-view. We could probably have up to like 3 in a 2-hour Dynamite if you tell these stories correctly, because there's so much damn talent that you have on that roster. So to me, it's Mercedes Mone is number 1. At 32 years old, she's still a star, and there's going to be some excitement around her. I think if you do it right, you can really elevate a lot of those other individuals in the women's division, and you can start building that thing where it could get red hot by the summer.
So I agree with everything you've said. The one issue, and the reason I don't put Mercedes at 1, is all of that should be true. That women's division should be the best in wrestling. That women's division should be main eventing shows. That women's division should have multiple matches on a show. But we haven't seen that yet from AEW. We don't know where Britt Baker is. We've seen Thunder Rosa come back, and now she's just sort of there. They're doing a great job with Toni Storm. They're telling those stories. The TBS title is even telling stories. The Willow stuff, the Julia Hart, Sky Blue. But there's been too much of, well, we started hot and there's not anything now, to where I worry about what they're going to do with the women's division. Even something as simple as Saraya. Like, that was such a big deal and such a big get. And now she's just an afterthought and part of Rampage. Like, that's not where she should be. So that is my biggest concern when it comes to Tony Khan and the booking of the women's division.
Which is fair, and I think you can say the same thing with Serena Deeb after she came back. Like, I enjoyed the vignettes that she had as the professional wrestling, and that's really kind of gone nowhere. But again, you start running down, and then you add people like Athena to that list that they have in ROH. Like, you've got
Jamie
an incredibly
Hayter's
deep.
Going to be back at some point. Like, remember how hot they got her?
Yeah. I think there's a lot you can do with that women's division, and I think that women's division could be the deepest that you have. So whether or not they actually give time to it, I don't know who TK would listen to in order to get that women's division hot. But I think you've got an opportunity there. So that's why I would put, because look, I don't expect, I expect Mercedes Moné to come in and be an immediate contender for the AEW Women's
As she
Championship.
should be, yes.
I don't expect, because we've seen Osprey around, I don't expect Osprey or Okada to be coming in and be wrestling Samoa Joe. Maybe eventually, but I don't think that they're going to be wrestling Samoa Joe at Double or Nothing for the AEW World Championship.
No, I think that's fair. And I think, so I have Osprey top of my list, mainly because I know that we're going to get 5-star matches whenever Osprey steps in the ring, because that's what he does. Like, we do our matches of the week. We should add the caveat, matches of the week that don't include Osprey, Bryan, or Swerve. Like, we see those guys every week. They step in the ring. They're going to deliver. So you have that aspect. I think there is something there to Osprey being on American television more frequently, being able to be found, to be on a Wednesday night, to where you know that when he goes out there, it doesn't matter what company he's working for, he's going to give you that 5-star match. But there still is reason for concern there also. I mean, we've seen it with Jay White, where he started off so hot, they protected him so well, and now he's just part of a mega group, and they're part of 12-man, and just a very odd spot for him right now. And not everyone could be a world title contender every week, but just the thought of Will Ospreay in wrestling matches every week, and him and Takeshi at Revolution, that's going to be a random middle of the night show card.
Yep.
But that match is going to deliver. That's just what Will Ospreay does, bruv.
Yeah, well, so I guess that's the other thing that I worry about. And I think you and Jay Hood really liked his "I've got stepkids, bruv.
Yeah.
I've got people I got to pay for, bruv" promo. I did not think it was as strong as you guys did, and I still have concerns about him being able to step in the ring and tell compelling stories. I know he's going to put on my favorite match of the week.
Right.
I know he's going to do that, but can he step in the ring and tell compelling stories? I know Mercedes Moné can, and I know she will. I have no doubt that, she's been very selective, right? Mm-hmm. And very easily could have gone back to WWE. All the reports out there saying that it fell apart because of money. Look, I think she's going to be protective of herself, and I think she's going to have a certain amount of creative control, which is part of the reason why she ended up walking away from WWE in the first place, because she didn't like the creative direction of her and Naomi as the tag team champions. So I think she's going to make sure she's telling those compelling stories that we want to see, that we're going to be interested in. Whereas I think there's a little bit more work that has to be done with Osprey and Okada. I'm just not more sure Okada fits in the wrestling landscape. Whether he would have signed with WWE or AEW, I feel at 36 years old, he's getting lost in the shuffle. Just because, again, maybe if he goes to WWE, he can be that guy who's putting on some great matches, an hour or two of Raw. But I don't know what compelling stories they're necessarily telling with an aging guy who's gone through some things with his body, because that New Japan style is so, rough and physical.
Right.
I think he can put on great matches. I don't know if he's going to be putting on compelling stories where I'm going to be like, oh man, I can't wait to see what Okada does next week.
No, I completely agree. And I think, Tony Khan has to sort of prove that. But I do think there's something as we step back and you put these 3 names out there, and these are all massive wins for AEW. WWE would have signed up for all 3 of these in a heartbeat. They all chose AEW. And maybe it is as simple as Tony's got deeper pockets or the lighter schedule is more appealing. But these 3 that seem to care about what they do in the ring, they see the booking. They have friends over there. So there still is reason for them to say, no, this is where I want to work. And I think that says a lot about Tony Khan and AEW right now.
Yeah, I mean, look, he's got certainly more misses than Triple H, but it's not like Triple H is batting 1,000 over at WWE, right? It's not everything that they again, they've already quickly pivoted on what they're doing for the main event of WrestleMania. I would say that certainly Triple H has been booking better than Tony Khan, but I think that there are signs of improvements. Look, he's still really young in doing this thing.
Right.
He hasn't been doing it for a while. He wasn't like Hunter, where he got to do it in NXT and kind of put together these different things and kind of figure out as he goes. But there have certainly been moments for AEW. And I think that they're maybe in one of those moments. Again, I go back to Double or Nothing 2022, where we felt really good about them, and it got derailed. The momentum got derailed by the first Forbidden Door, and I just don't think they've recaptured that. Where maybe now going into 24, maybe they can recapture some of that momentum that they had. Now, granted, at that time they had CM Punk, who was still one of the biggest stars in professional wrestling, but maybe this combination of these 3 can kind of fill that gap of CM Punk and you still have those stars and compelling stories going into Double or Nothing in early summer.
So you're excited to see these three are part of the CMLL Forbidden Door? Because it seems to be the path they're going.
That's
No?
look, I mean, you make that joke, but I'm fine with like the people they're sending there, right?
Yeah, but it feels like they're going that path. Like they've been fun matches, and the Blackpool Comic Club's going to Mexico, but I don't know.
Well, yeah, but that's the thing. Like you get those CML out, you got those guys here. You scratch our back, we scratch yours. We'll send some of our stars there. And look, that's also probably Bryan Danielson, who for whatever reason has wrestling in Mexico and CMLL on his bucket list before he retires. Like that could be a completely Bryan Danielson led thing where Tony's going, really? All right, Bryan, go ahead. Go do your thing.
There's a video going around. One of the guys who's wrestling in a few weeks in Mexico, Blue Panther, I believe. It's from like over a decade ago. A Blue Panther sending him a signed mask saying, "Oh, we'd love to hook up one day in Mexico." And Bryan, obviously in WWE, is like, "Oh yeah, one day." And like you can see the seed is planted, and now here we are in 24. Bryan's like, "Yep, that's what I'm doing. Mexico, here we come." Like the guy, he's a psychopath.
Again, it's well established. He's a wrestling. Look, we're the beneficiaries for it.
Yeah,
we get to see some really cool stuff from it, but that doesn't change the fact that Bryan Danielson's a wrestling psychopath.
Yes, it doesn't change the fact that I'm to figure out a way of how to watch CMLL and, brush up on my Spanish and things like that. But it's where we are right now.
Like, it's got to be on Fight, right? Like Fight TV's got to have that thing. Like there's no way that Fight, like they're going to work it out. Like let me put it this way. It's going to be easier to be able to watch that than signing up for New Japan World and watching Wrestle Kingdom. Like I think it's going to be easier than that.
They got me for 2 months, but I do have some matches of the week from New Japan this week, so there's a little tease for you.
Can't wait till we get to that portion of the program. What do we got at number 3 this week, Brian?
All right, we talked a little bit about the WrestleMania main event. Seth Rollins says he has Cody's back, so we're expecting a group effort to protect Cody at WrestleMania. Let's do some fantasy booking. What other surprise returns can have Cody's back against the Bloodline at Mania?
Well, so we're talking about surprise returns, like people who aren't with WWE right now. Because, like, clearly I think Sammy is going to be added. Like, Sammy's going to be added to this group, right? Like,
KO,
especially
you would imagine.
Yeah. Like anybody else. So, to me, the one, a surprise return is John Cena, right?
Okay.
Like, John, like, at some point, just because you have a lot going on there, clearly Cena with Roman, but also Cena and Rock in the history that they have.
Sure.
I think maybe you can't get John for a full WrestleMania match, but for him to run in and give somebody an AA or a 5-knuckle shuffle on one of the nights of WrestleMania, I'm sure John can find some time in his schedule to be able to come do that.
I think that'd be a good one. The other one I had just for the nostalgia, just for us, Attitude Era, the glass hits and you get an Austin Rock moment. I mean, come on. What else do you need?
If that glass shatters, Philadelphia is going to lose their damn mind.
Yeah.
Like if that glass shatters, everybody is going to go crazy. And Stone Cold was just giving he was talking, I can't remember where he was doing the interview, but I saw some of the highlights this week of, he thinks he's done, but never say never. He's got an opponent in mind, but he doesn't want to say who it is because he doesn't want to put pressure on WWE to book this match. I mean, I think everybody assumes it's CM Punk.
Yeah.
And the interviewer asked oh, are you talking about CM Punk? And he's like, well, I respect Punk. I think he's a friend, all these different things. But I think, that's been fantasy booked for over a decade at this point.
Right.
When CM Punk was previously in WWE, I think everybody would love to see that. But if the glass shatters and Stone Cold starts handing out stunners, yes, the place is going to absolutely lose their mind.
And can Dwayne still take the stunner like he did back in the day? Like that big balance where he's almost doing a handstand. Like, can he still pull that off?
There's only one way to find out, Brian. There's really only one way to find out, and that is to eat the Stone Cold stunner.
Of course.
That is... So what? So we've got, on the Bloodline side of things, you'd have... So 4 guys total with Roman, Jimmy, Rock, and...
Solo.
And Solo.
And do you count Heyman? He's sort of there. Heyman could take a bump.
Yeah, I mean, Heyman could take a bump. He's not giving, he's not making anybody take a bump. So then you just need 4 to make it. So you need 3 guys on the other side to make it even.
So Rollins, Sammy, Jay, you assume?
Jay, yeah. I don't know if there's... I don't know if there's anybody else from the from that massive family tree that they put on display at the press conference that they can bring in on the bloodline side, where you just really start making it crazy with the Cenas and the Stone Colds of the world. I swear to God, though, if I hear "I Am a Real American" blare through the speakers, because they continuously
there's a lot of seed planting there.
Yeah, I know. He's just kind of peripherally there where they're trying to find a spot to put him, and him dropping the leg on someone during this match. Hopefully if this was still Vince booking,
yes,
Hogan would 100% be there. I would like to think that Triple H is smarter than that. That's not what we want to see.
I don't know, honestly, but the other one I throw out there, I know it's way out there, and there'll be a lot of back scratching to make it happen. Any way to pull off Dustin for one night, just to be there, to help out his brother, to see the world title win, and just do something like that.
I think you could do it.
Yeah.
I mean, come on. I mean, seriously, literally all these other companies are working together. Impact has worked with both companies now at this point, with AEW, with WWE. And I know Impact worked with WWE back in the day, which is how Christian ended up over there at one point, right? Because they were trying to figure out different things with the trade. I understand Triple H thinks it's a piss hand company. I understand that TK takes a shot at WWE every opportunity that he can get. But there's got to be something you can do to work together to get, like you said. I mean, Dustin being there, I think, would be a really cool moment.
Yeah.
And honestly, one of my favorite moments in WWE in the last, God, how long has it been now? I mean, 10. So we'll call it 10 to 15 years just to make sure we get it in there. But when Dustin was on the brink of getting fired, and then they tag together, and Dusty comes back as in their corner, and they win the tag team match together as the Rhodes Boys. That was a really cool storyline that they did. So I'm sure Dustin would love to be there. Clearly has a history within WWE. I can't imagine he's got bad blood with anybody. Anywhere. Anywhere.
Right. He's one of those guys who work out a one night only trade somehow. And then, in exchange, Rollins eats a pin from Osprey on an AEW show. And that's a beautiful Wednesday night. We're good to go.
Wait, that's the trade?
Dustin for Rollins.
You get Dustin for one night, and Seth has to come to Dynamite on a Wednesday?
Yes.
I mean, I was thinking maybe KO or Sammy. I wasn't going to the top of the. I wasn't going to the top.
Also.
Or maybe if we get I'm trying to think of a great tag team match they could do. You could do Usos versus Nicholas and Matthew Jackson.
Okay, I'd be okay with that. Or New Day versus them. The New Day always talks about that. So a New Day Young Bucks. All right, I'd be fine with that.
Yeah, some of the iconic tag, an iconic tag match or something like that. But no, okay. I mean, look, Seth Rollins versus Osprey, admittedly would be awesome. I can't imagine that Hunter would survive the social media backlash of getting fleeced in that trade of one night only appearances. But
you get
I would love to see Dustin
get to add to that moment.
And look, he could just be Goldust in WWE too, right? You don't have to use the name Dustin Rhodes. He doesn't have to be the natural.
You don't know who it is.
Have him be Goldust.
I mean, we saw
He's Goldust
without a mask at last year's Mania. Big swerve there.
-1. Look, I think there are a lot of different directions you can go here, but clearly they are hinting at building up some sort of army, which is, again, what you need in order to actually defeat. That's why the promo that Rollins delivers has so much weight to it, because, hey, this isn't Cody's best chance. This is our best chance, making a collective WWE type thing so he can build up this army that's going to be in his corner to battle whatever's going on within the bloodline. I think that makes sense, and having some sort of surprise return and somebody cleaning house and helping out Cody, man, as cool as it would be to even hear that glass shatter, having Dustin there, I think would have the place wouldn't pop if Goldust's music. I mean, there would be a mini pop. Just people lose their mind when they hear The Rock's and Stone Cold's music. It's just a different level for those two. But I think the amount of tears you would see as those two embraced after Cody won the championship that their father couldn't win, Like, there wouldn't be a dry eye in the damn building.
Yeah, I mean, we saw those two literally do that to basically launch AEW when the two of them in the ring and having that embrace and, I need my brother. Like, that would be unbelievable storytelling, and I think everyone would benefit from it.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm 100% there with you on that one. Look, we're still a ways away from it. I'm still hopeful they can continue to build the momentum to make me care more about Cody versus Roman instead of I think tomorrow night's going to be a big night. I think Friday night SmackDown is going to be a huge night with the Bloodline, with The Rock, with Roman being on SmackDown tomorrow night. It's going to be a huge start in that build for WrestleMania. And hopefully they make it worth it. And hopefully they start making me care more about Cody versus Roman instead of wanting Cody versus The Rock.
Agreed.
More than that. Or maybe they just lean into it and they give us Cody versus The Rock. Look, I don't care. Like, make me care about WrestleMania main events. And I think they're going to do a fairly good job of that. What do we got at news and notes this week, Brian?
All right, let's start with some injury news in AEW. At Rampage tapings last night, Jeff Hardy took a Sammy Guevara knee to the head, did look concussed, had to be helped out by doctors.
Unfortunate for Jeff because he's actually been on, oddly hot streak.
I know.
Putting on some pretty good matches in AEW. So yeah, just unfortunate that happens. But again, it's professional wrestling and these types. Hopefully he's good to go in a couple of weeks. He can kind of continue some of the things that he's been doing because he's been putting on some fun, compelling matches on Rampage.
In the WWE, Shotzi had her NXT Women's Championship match at tapings ended early this week due to a knee injury. She has been replaced in Elimination Chamber qualifier by Alba Fire, facing Tiffany Stratton on Friday night.
Well, I think it was pretty obvious who was winning that match anyway. Can't imagine Stratton's losing to a replacement. And look, they were building up Stratton anyway with her return, so she was going to be in that match. Unfortunate for Shotzi because she has been pretty prominently featured, I think, on television. She's gotten some matches on SmackDown, getting that spot on NXT. Hopefully it's not a super serious long-term injury for her.
Also on social media this week, speaking of Tiffany Stratton, her and Ludwig Kaiser, a wrestling couple. So that going around this week.
Really?
Yeah, so congrats to him. Elsewhere, AEW QT Marshall is back in AEW after leaving the company on December 31st. Less than 2 months later, he is back in the company. Dave Meltzer says his role will be in talent development, and he will not be in an on-air wrestling role.
Yeah, so I think a part of that, he can continue to wrestle wherever, obviously outside of WWE.
Which makes sense because he's the current Coastal Championship Wrestling World Champion down here in South Florida. Shout out to CCW.
Also, can you imagine, they can't come to terms on Dusty, so they send QT instead to be in the conversation we were just having QT Marshall run in there.
Different levels there.
Yeah, certainly different levels there. Look, I think having him back is a good thing. I think he was, by all reports, doing good things behind the scenes. And these are the type of people that Tony needs to have and Tony needs to trust, right? Allow these people to do their job. I think it's a good thing that the company showed they can repair these types of relationships and welcome them back into the fold. And I think maybe some of his frustrations were the way he was maybe shown on TV and decided to walk away. But again, now that he can just focus on a behind-the-scenes role, that's going to be good for him and the company.
The weird part is, he was very vocal about, AEW is going in a direction, I don't agree with. Nothing's really changed in AEW. Could this be as simple as he thought Cody would get him a job, and Hunter's like, no, we're good?
Very well could be. Very, very well could be. Because QT, some of the stuff they did with QTV was fun, but I don't know if he ever put on a really compelling match that I absolutely loved, right?
No. Him versus Paul White didn't do it for you?
Yeah, not really. Unfortunately. I completely forgot it was a thing, to be honest with you.
Finally, news and notes. Speaking of WrestleMania, LA Knight on the bump says he wants Usher to perform "Yeah" for his WrestleMania entrance.
But here's the thing with "Yeah." Does that mean you got to bring in Little John? You got to bring in Ludacris? You got to bring in everybody, right?
Or you
because those were the guys that stole the Super Bowl halftime show anyway. Those were the two. Little John showing up and yelling "Yeah" and "Okay" as he does. And then Luda absolutely killed it. So
maybe he just wants Little John. I think that's what LA Knight's really saying. He's like, I sort of like this song.
Yeah.
I need someone to say "Yeah" with me.
Yeah, exactly. Like, and that's who Little John is.
Right.
Like, you don't need Usher.
No.
You just need Little John there with you. That's the guy who you really want.
And that
I
might be
think that's
more
the guy who
affordable.
everybody wants to see.
Like from an Endeavor standpoint, might be more affordable to get Lil Jon than Usher right now.
1,000%. 1,000%. I mean, Hunter's no. I mean, they've broken the bank before, and they've gotten some acts to play guys to the ring. Like, I can't imagine getting Usher to sing you to the ring. And again, when Little John, when he's the one saying the things you want him to say.
Yeah.
Are we sure LA Knight's going to be on the WrestleMania card?
Him and Styles?
I guess. I mean, he's cooled down considerably.
Yep.
Considerably.
You mean you don't have him winning the Chamber next week?
No.
Oh, okay.
No. I thought about saying yeah just to say it, but unfortunately the answer is no. No, I do not.
Yeah.
I think we know who's winning Chamber next week.
Yep. We'll see.
And he's a big guy who is apparently yet to sign a contract, even though he's being advertised for some shows that reportedly go beyond the contract.
Adding zeros to that contract. He's doing his part.
Oh, without a doubt. Without a doubt. And look, and maybe they're playing hardball with him because they know that, hey, you're a big guy. You don't make sense over at the other place.
I don't know. He's going to be there. He's going to make some money. Like, I'm very interested to see what he does this time around.
What did you have for your match of the week?
All right. Well, I'm going to start with New Japan.
You said New Japan. I'm excited for these New Japan ones that you have.
So they had New Beginning this week. It was Sunday here in America, Super Bowl Sunday. No word on if Taylor Swift made it there in Japan before coming to Vegas. But this is going to come shocking. Bryan Danielson was in a match. He was facing Zack Sabre Jr. And it was really good. So
funny, I would have never thought that those two would have been able to put on a world-class match.
Yeah, so that happened. So that was really good. That was definitely the best match on the card. And just seeing Bryan do his thing and continue to get these matches, these dream matches, it wasn't as good as their Forbidden Door, but it still was a really good match, and it was cool to see that. And then also that night, Okada, it was his final time wrestling in Japan for New Japan. Not a great match, but still, him getting that moment, getting the emotional entrance and exit, I thought that was a pretty cool moment in New Japan. So check that out if you have not canceled New Japan World yet, which I have not. But
from Wrestle Kingdom.
Yeah, I'm going to get them this month. They're not going to get me again. Other matches I had, DIY versus Butch and Tyler Bate from SmackDown, I thought was pretty good, which isn't surprising with those four. From Raw, I really enjoyed Zoe Stark and Liv Morgan.
Sure.
And it was different, but like the two of them just getting some time to work, I thought was really good. And the other one I'll throw out there, Mox and Dax from last night on Dynamite, which isn't surprising.
Yeah, like again, not shocking. Like every time Dax wrestles as a singles competitor, like he puts on, I mean, he's never going to win, but he ends up putting on a great match. I mean, he had a streak of those last summer where he was wrestling as a singles guy. And yeah, so I had Mox versus Dax certainly on my list. I like the trios match from Raw that kicked off Raw on Monday with the New Day and Jim and Jey Uso taking on Imperium. I thought that was a lot of fun. They gave it a lot of time to kind of kick off the show, which, by the way, was kind of, I mean, they haven't done it all that often where they actually start with a match on Monday Night Raw. Usually it's somebody coming out with a promo to set something up for later. So I also enjoyed that was the start. Hey, let's start with this kick-ass wrestling match on a wrestling show. I thought it was, something. And speaking of guys who kick off things with kick-ass wrestling shows, even though he didn't kick it off, usually Orange Cassidy does kick off his match with Ishii on Collision on Saturday night. Like, look, I mean, I understand that Ishii's, he's up there in age, doesn't move, but it was still a fantastic match. Yeah. Like, it was still a lot of fun to kind of watch those two on Collision.
And the chops,
so I really enjoyed
that whole thing with the two of them where like Orange is trying to get like that was fun.
Well, again, like, and I still can't believe they made Orange Cassidy wrestle a death match last night. Like, that was an interesting decision.
So on that, like, that is the main event. I thought was very odd last night.
Yeah, I don't know, but if you do a death match, like you can't do a death match at 8:45, right?
Yeah.
Like it's got to close out the show. anytime you do a death match.
It was one of those things where, like, I didn't even know going in. I was like, what's left? Like, everything I feel like that was advertised was already done. I know they did the schmozzy finish with Copeland and Garcia, which I thought was going to be the main event. I just thought that was odd last night.
Yeah, I mean, that's what should have main evented it. Like, going off the air with doing a concerto to Copeland, like, seems like a good way to end it. But I don't know. When you do a death match, there's just so much crap you have to clean up afterwards, which I did. My favorite part of the death match last night was the Valentine that he got. It's like, oh, what's in the box? Oh, it's thumbtacks. That's what's in the box. But yeah, that was not the OC match of the week. I like the one from Collision. Also, Garcia versus Shane Taylor from Collision was pretty good.
And Collision just continues to deliver. Like, Collision continues to be one of my favorite shows of the week. Like, it's not skippable for me. Like, it's just damn good wrestling every week.
Well, and people are starting to catch on. I think that the number it did, was one of the better numbers they've did on a Saturday night. And look, they're not be getting, 1 million people watching on a Saturday night for a show, but I think TNT has to be pretty happy with that, which makes me sad because there is, as a note, there is no Collision this week.
No, I know.
No Collision at all.
Damn
no Collision
NBA.
Because of NBA All-Star festivities, NBA All-Star Saturday night taking up TNT. And usually when they've done this in the past, I'm just glad they're not like tagging it on with Rampage or something on a Friday night and trying to do it that way. Just, this is the smart way to do it as long as all parties are cool. Like, hey, let's just cancel this. Let's get back to it next week. It's not that big of a deal. So that does seem like
Eastern this week. So adjust your life accordingly.
Yes, because they have other things going on with the All-Star festivities. So yes, make sure you adjust your DVR if it does not adjust automatically. Although again, I don't know what you're going to be missing if you don't tune in, other than Jeff Hardy. Like, if you don't want to see Jeff Hardy get injured, then I guess don't worry about it.
Second Hardy's now taking out both Hardys, so congrats to him, I guess. Remember, he gave Matt that concussion when he took that fall off that thing, and then they kept wrestling.
Yeah, great. Wrestling, though, again, I think there was a lot of good action to choose from this week. Make sure you're subscribing on YouTube. If you listen to us through podcast, we thank you. I understand it's easy for a lot of people to watch, but if you want to see the show as well, comment, subscribe, check us out on YouTube. We also put up some different videos throughout the course of the week. Just go to youtube.com/@GoodKarmaWrestling. Leave a comment and subscribe. Check us out over there on YouTube to check out the video portion of this podcast. Next week, Jay Hood will return. This has been